Hi, and welcome back to episode 10 of the Leading Adam podcast. Today, we are going to talk about mining for gold, and not the fool's gold that we all panned for as little kids. We're going to talk about looking for gold on your team and how that impacts retention. Stay with us.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkerd. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation in student retention and education. And now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erika Crabtree, produced by Chris Spangle, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com. And I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world.
Hey, Adam.
Hey, Erika.
How are you doing?
Good.
Are you still drinking coffee or have you switched?
No, actually, it's been water the entire time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, some may not know this. I didn't know this. We talked about this. You said when we started, I'd been on a few podcasts.
Yeah.
You had not. Mm-hmm. And now we're on this side of it. And I'm learning so much.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm learning is that it's not a new day. We just recorded episode 9 and now we're doing episode 10.
Truth.
We're going to pull back the curtain a little bit. I think we got to be done pretending that these are different days.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious we're wearing the exact same clothes. I changed my hat.
Pretty comfortable. And yeah, these are my favorite pants. So I'm not.
You weren't about to change?
Nope.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in this all day.
Well, honestly, I mean, it's ridiculous and it really doesn't matter for the content for which we're doing this podcast. Mm-hmm. But, it's one of those things that you learn in the beginning. We said we were going to be authentic and I don't want to be anything else. And,
yep.
And when we started, this was like, okay, we got to change. It's a new episode. We got to act like it's a new morning.
Different.
It's not a new morning, folks. We've been up. We're still sore from our work this weekend.
100%.
None of that's changed at all. The only thing that changed is my hat.
Right.
And here we are going to record a new episode with a different hat.
Awesome. Well, I like that hat. So
thank you. You see what it says?
Real good. It says, I am not enough.
I am not enough.
Mm-hmm. And what does that mean?
Well, it kind of throws right in the face of there's like a social movement that I am enough. Mm-hmm. And I learned early in my career that's just simply not true. Mm-hmm. It's a lie that leads us down a path of self-importance. And I'm not going to do that. And so ultimately, I am not enough is a constant reminder that I need those around me. I wasn't created to operate in isolation. I wasn't created to have all the answers. I need people. Mm-hmm. And in an organizational leadership context, it's even more important. Mm-hmm. That's not the conversation for today, but that's what it is. I'm not enough because I have one piece to bring. And that piece is super important. And I need to be me and I need to show up as me for that piece. But I don't need to pretend that I can do your part. Right. And that's where we start to fall apart and we start to lose team members in the sense that they don't feel like they matter. Mm-hmm. It's a theme for me. I am not enough.
That's a perfect transition because it does remind me of what we just talked about in episode 9, where we connected retention with admissions.
Yep.
And we talked about, I work in admissions, so have that perspective, but I can't do my job without everybody else.
Yeah.
I need my financial aid friends with all their expertise. I need the academic advisors who have that level of expertise. We all rely on each other. We're part of that community. And if we feel like we're a community and we're all working together for the same purpose, with a shared purpose, then our students see that as well. And they see what they're looking for within us. Mm-hmm. And so that leads us to this episode.
Yeah.
where we talk about, mining for gold
Yeah.
within your team.
Yeah. And that's a term I've been using for several years now, this idea of mining gold. And the emphasis here is going to be on, as leaders, how do we foster that environment that is a community for the students, that it is ready and prepared for retention.
Yeah.
Because retention is not an action so much as it is an environment, in my experience. And if that is true, which again, from my experience is true, then there's a responsibility to create that environment. And that responsibility is on the leader. And I don't think we connect leadership to retention as much as we connect to retention to things like tutoring programs and writing programs,
Right.
and all of these technical supports. But the reality is that retention really kind of comes out of an environment. And I think that's where we want to talk down the line today is if you said in last episode that the admissions piece is connected to retention before the student even calls. And that's, when you said that, I was like, what? Is there something before the student calls? Right. I should know this answer. But what you were getting at is, it's the community.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're an outreach, an extension, I should say, of that community.
It's those relationships that are in place.
Right. So if
Trust.
that doesn't exist, if that body of the institution, let's talk about institutions and organizations as bodies, because we're talking about community. If we process the organization itself as human, now we have a different starting point, and we recognize that the admissions action, the enrollment counselor's role, is really just that first reach to the student, because the institution reaches, and that gets to be you and the role that you do. And so talking through, how do we make sure that body is positioned to function the way it should function,
Right.
so that it can reach. So that's what we're going to hit a little bit today.
Yeah. No, that's super exciting. And how would you define, like, what does that environment look like? What are the conditions that are right for that to exist, for that humanity to exist?
It looks a lot like I want to say like a locker room. I'm not real big on sports analogies, but I don't want to go the family route because that's dangerous.
Right.
100%. If you're listening as an organizational leader, please, for God's sake, stop using the term family. Your organization is not a family. Families cover stuff up. Teams hold each other accountable to win. And that's the primary difference. So if you're that guy saying we're just a family, stop it. Move toward team mentality. And so I would start there. I think it looks a lot like a locker room in the sense that there's not the pretense, right? So if your organization, if your team, if your environment looks more like pretense, like I've got to carry myself a certain way and I've got to do this, instead of just realizing that we're all together. Because when a team goes into the locker room, they're a different group than they are when they step onto the field.
Right.
Right. So when we step onto the field, that's different. And so if I would be asking myself as a leader, okay, well, how would I know if that's not the case?
Right.
And there's guaranteed to be an unspoken and unknown tension. If that exists, you're probably got pretense. And so I think the environment first kind of looks like that. It's like, it's no pretense. Like we're in this, it's messy. Sometimes we get it wrong, but we all have the same goal. And we're all in this with a heart of passion for this thing instead of I'm more passionate than you are.
Yeah. And some of what, I'm not a big sports person, but from what I understand, some of what goes on in a locker room is there's that like rallying, getting the team excited to go out to the field to do their job, to play, right? And so I was just envisioning like that also is that really important as a leader. That's that ability to bring the team together to get them excited about that shared vision and the shared purpose and to everybody understands their role and how they contribute to the team winning.
Yeah.
And then they go out and they execute on that.
Yeah. Also in that same locker room though, there's accountability, right? There's, especially at halftime, in a football context, we got to call out the missed blocks. We got to call out the route that was run incorrectly, whatever the case may be, because if you don't do that, you can't make the adjustments. And I think a lot of times the perspective, the philosophy that I lead with gets a rap of, okay, that's all that mushy gushy stuff. It's all about the emotions, rah, rah, ree. And that's not really true. Leading with vision, leading with purpose is important. It's not more important than accountability. And I think that's the part of this that's as much of a human thing and a need, accountability to know where I'm at. Am I doing well? Am I not doing well?
Right.
That kind of stuff is just as important as that speech, right? That moment where we go, we're in this, we got this, let's go get some students, in this particular context. So yeah, but
nothing is more refreshing, I think, than some clear expectations.
Man. You are not kidding.
Can be so overlooked. It seems like such an obvious, simple thing, but it's really not. Just we all have been in that situation where you hear something a little bit differently, or you recognize you share something and the other person heard that differently, or just you each go out and there's different ways of approaching or different ways of thinking about something, and you didn't quite land where it needed to.
Right.
And maybe that's just it's a miscommunication. Maybe you thought it was great. I think I did a great job, but
yes,
the other person was expecting something else. So the clear expectations.
Yes, clear expectations. Well, there's so many things, Erika, that we can get into from a leadership perspective. What can a leader do? And when we talk about clear expectations in that, a lot of that is related to structure and process. But it all has to back up to something else, which is why we're going to talk about mining gold. Because the reality of leading with a human-centered focus has to start with the belief that it matters. Okay, so I like the term mining gold. Let's just talk about like the philosophical connections first of all. I like the term mining gold because there's this kind of understanding that gold has value, right? It's precious. It's a precious metal. It also though is something you don't just find laying in the mulch bed, right? It takes intention to go find. So there's some bridges there, but let's roll it back, to the expansion of Western America. We've all heard of the gold rush and everybody's running out there. They're going to be wealthy and all this, and many were, I'm sure. But let's start from the moment the guy is out, pulling plow behind the mule, and one of his buddies comes over and goes, I think we should go west. Let's go get some gold. That individual doesn't walk away from the property they have, the safety and security and predictability that they have, unless they first believe that there's gold to be found.
Right.
And that's where we have to start, is from an organizational leadership or team leadership even perspective. I will never pursue a human-centered approach. I will never pursue an environment that holds your humanity high if I don't believe there's value in it And I have to have value in that, believing there's value in you. But that's the trick. As a leader, I have to start there. There's gold in you, and I'm not going to find it on the mulch bed of your life.
Right.
Right. I got to look a little bit deeper.
Right. Yeah. So it makes me wonder with leaders, I know so many times it is pretty easy as a leader, especially in a large organization. The higher up you go, the further you sort of get away from some of those frontline type duties, or just, the day-to-day kind of operations. And it's, you might not even, if you're working remotely or whatnot, you might not even see your team members,
Sure.
on a day-to-day. So as a leader, how do you diagnose that there's a problem? You mentioned, understanding that there is value, or knowing that there's value. And it makes me think there has to be a way to sort of build a business case for that, quantify it. So if you're a leader and you're thinking, okay, I sense maybe there's a tension, maybe you don't know how severe the tension is. You're not really aware, but you kind of get a sense that maybe there's some tension going on.
Right.
How do you start to diagnose or measure that, or how do you know what your starting point is?
Yeah, I think it starts what we've been talking about, the three components of that human experience, right? So if there's tension there, something's off in the human experience. It's believing that first. And then if you start there and go, something's askew in our team's human experience, then the natural question after that should be, is it an issue with belonging? Is there a vulnerability issue, or is there a shared purpose issue? Chances are there's opportunity in all three lanes, but which one has the lowest hanging fruit? And that's kind of where we can lean into. And that's, from 240 Solutions, we created a tool to measure that. So we measure the human experience in an organization and then help leaders say, okay, here are the points. Here's your low hanging fruit. Let's push into that. And I was having a conversation with a leader just this week, helping them see that the low hanging fruit, in fact, most of the fruit around the human experience is free. It doesn't cost a dime. It costs our time, and it costs our thinking, because we've got to think differently. But it's not an expensive thing, So being able to identify like where is the challenge first is important. But even again, like rolling back to what I was just saying, if you don't care, you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
I can't help but think back to a group we were doing leader development with. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here as it relates to retention. But I was doing this leader development with a group, and we're going through actually the skill of curiosity is what we were going through. Most underrated skill of leadership, I believe, in the world today. And one of the participants raised their hand and said, "Okay, hold on. So what you're saying is that it all starts with giving a damn." And I couldn't help but laugh because I'm like, he just simplified this entire program
right there and done
to basically one phrase, give a damn. But he's right. That you have to begin there. And if you don't, then you're probably hearing this conversation going, man, that's squishy. That's soft. But it's not. It's the foundation on which all the other things that you think are important are built on. And so, yeah, I think even in that, you ask the question, like, how does a leader identify? Well, you can't identify if you first don't believe that it matters. You have to care about the humanity on your team. But I want to talk a little bit, too, about, you talked about the higher you are in position. Back to education specifically, back to retention specifically. The higher you are in your position, the more distant you are from direct interaction with students. And I think one of the biggest misses in retention initiatives in every institution that I've had a positive or neutral interaction with is the absence of leadership development programs for the purpose of retention. Because we forget that I may be here distant, very, very distant from the relationship and direct interaction with the student. But how I treat my team is how my team will treat their middle managers. It's how those middle managers will treat their team. And it's how those teams will interact with the student. It all works together. And so for the leader who's thinking, okay, the retention initiatives, if you're looking at those initiatives and then thinking of a person and going, that's their job, that's why your retention initiatives aren't working, because it's just as much our responsibility as leaders to embody those behaviors.
So how does, you mention leadership development for retention, how does that differ from other leadership development initiatives that an organization might go through?
Well, let me do what I know you love, is flip the question a little bit to you.
Oh, yeah.
When you're interacting with a student, what's probably the most helpful skill you can have? Not knowledge. Knowledge is understanding the programming, understanding the process. But what is the most helpful skill you can have in interacting with a student?
I think of empathy, active listening, the curiosity that you mentioned.
Right. So right there, you've given 3 really broad topics to develop leaders on. A lot of our leader development stuff, especially in a next man up thing, focuses too much on things like time management, conflict resolution, delivering effective feedback. All of those, super important. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
They are important. But leadership comes from being human, right? It's influencing people. And when I'm curious, when we interact and you believe that I have your best interest in mind, or you believe that I'm genuinely interested in who you are and where you want to go, that makes you respond a certain way.
Right.
It also models that for you, to model that then to the student. So I don't know that they're different for retention. I just think we've got to back up and ask, what are those skills that down here, right?
Yeah.
Because again, you cannot offer that which you first don't possess. What are the necessary skills for successful admissions? What are the necessary skills for successful mentoring, advising, et cetera, et cetera? Okay. We ought to make sure our leaders have those skills and that they're modeling those skills. If they're not, probably going to get a little off.
Yeah. And when you describe that, when you're working with someone, working with a leader, or vice versa, just anyone, and you know that that person values you as a human, there's a freedom in that to be vulnerable, to be innovative,
Right.
to share ideas, to have maybe even, difficult conversations and say, hey, I don't think this is working quite right, but I have an idea of how that could be better. Because all of that other stuff strips away all of the, just the dark, toxic kind of things, those thoughts that can infiltrate, and get in the way of innovation and productive conversations and all of that just falls away. Yeah. And there's just such a freedom with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm inclined to give an example of that. But let's maybe come back to it, 'cause I want to just be a little bit more clear about when you're mining gold. What is gold? Let's not miss that, because we're not going to do another episode on this probably. I think the simple thing that we do as leaders is we see someone's skills and we assign that as gold. you're really good at sales, or you're really good at understanding all the course offerings, or you're a really good instructor because you're an expert in this thing. And we look at that and we go, that's gold. Mm-hmm. But that's not gold, because that can be taken away. Mm-hmm. And so as a leader, is to encourage those leaders to go, if you do care about the human experience, you don't have to know immediately, do I need to focus on belonging, vulnerability, or shared purpose? Mm-hmm. Like, let's strip it back and go, the thing you need to focus on is the brilliance in your team, the gold in your team. So what is it? And it's the things that really are, they're a little bit intangible, and they're going to be in you regardless of what's happening. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to point to things like your mindset and your attitude. Right? So if we look at that, and if you show up, let's roll it back. You just painted how many 34 spindles on your staircase, right? Your hands probably cramping at some point during that process. Yep. Your back hurts because we're not made to sit like that. Right. And you show up to work, you've had a weekend like that, and you show up on time, and you show up with a good attitude. Mm-hmm. That's the gold. Mm-hmm. And so as a leader, when someone's sharing that bit with you, it's really simple to just right then go, man, it sounds like you had a tough weekend. Thank you for being here today. Mm-hmm. I always appreciate your smile. Mm-hmm. That's huge. Again, I told you the stuff is free.
Right.
You didn't have to go. You didn't have to go buy something to do that. Uh-huh. But when we look at mindset and attitude, those are things that are huge. And now, why does that need to be in a leadership development program? Because I sure as the world need to understand what mindset and attitude look like for what we're trying to achieve. Right. So looking for things like resilience. All of those types of skills. So anyway, I just didn't want to get past that. I think it's important for us to know, you have to believe there's gold. Mm-hmm. And then if you believe that, you have to know what you're looking for, because there is fool's gold, and that's the stuff, right? When it's like, you're a fancy dresser, or you carry yourself well, you're well spoken. That's all fool's gold. Mm-hmm. That's not real. Mm-hmm. The real stuff is mindset and attitude and all of those bits like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really the more sort of separating the skills, the knowledge, the abilities. A lot of those things can be trained to, those are addressed in different ways. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what you're getting at really is more the heart of a person, the thing that crosses, they could work in any job role, any environment, and these things would likely still be true.
Yes. Yes. So I loved, as we finish, to give a story of what you said. When that environment's there, you feel a freedom. Mm-hmm. When a leader expresses interest in who you are, where you want to be, you feel a freedom. You said, and that freedom fosters things like innovation. Because you're not so insecure about saying, I've got an idea, or I got a question. Why this? Mm-hmm. So I'm working at the time in higher ed, executive director of student success, and we had made it really clear that student success is all of our jobs. Right? We were talking this out, and so at one point, to shorten the story, back to our financial aid folks, one of our financial aid folks had reached out and said, I think this form, which is an authorization to retain funds form specific to the accounting side. It's like half financial aid, half accounting. This form, they said, I think it's causing an issue. So I had just asked the question, well, why do you think it's causing an issue? Explain to me what the form is. Right? That's the other side. If you're a leader, and don't pretend you know the answers, just ask. So I just asked, what is this form? And they explained, well, it is the students making a decision at the beginning. How much of your financial aid funds do you want to retain? Mm-hmm. Do you want to retain just enough for your course? Do you want to retain, or for your program? With academic year, that's the word. Right. Do you want to retain all of it? And then how do you want that? Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, I'm with you. And like, why though? Why do you think this is an interruption? You're like, because if they choose this selection, they're incurring more debt, and they could potentially run out of funds and not be able to finish their program. I'm like, wow, I never would have noticed that. Right, but they were willing to bring this up. So we put together a small group and said, okay, what are we going to do about it? We had accountants in the room, financial aid in the room, and then some leaders like myself. And ultimately the decision was, you can't really create defaults around the form. There's rules, but you can change the way the form looks. And you have to have some of the language has to be specific, but the titles don't have to be. So what we ended up doing is changing the selections to say low debt option, high debt option.
Simple language.
Simple language the student understood.
Yeah.
Very, very human thing. Within the next term, we saw 638% reduction in the students that were choosing the high debt option, which meant there was an enormous amount of students entering from that point forward that were going to have enough funds to finish their program. What a huge thing, right? And all that came from someone feeling like they mattered. Right?
Yeah, and they passed that. They felt like they were cared for, they mattered, and they showed exceptional care for the student in what's in their best interest.
Right, because
Awesome.
that student's debt affects that individual's life.
Yeah.
None. But it mattered to them because I don't want you to have all this debt.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wanted to share that story. It's one of my favorites because it come from a spot where you just don't think of retention.
Yeah.
But it was a big component, and shout out to those individuals. They know who they were. Yeah. So appreciate that. But thanks for a good conversation. I can go all day about
time goes so fast.
Leaders. It goes so fast. So
it's fun.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for another great episode.
Yeah, likewise.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.